A NOx sensor costs about $230. It weighs less than a pound. It's about the size of your index finger. And when it fails, and it will fail, your 9,000-pound diesel truck with 400 horsepower and 900 foot-pounds of torque goes into limp mode. 35 miles per hour. Max. On the highway. In traffic. With your family in the cab and 10,000 pounds on the trailer. Because a sensor, the size of your finger, told the computer something it didn't like. That's not a malfunction. That's a design choice. And once you understand why it's designed that way, you start to see the entire modern truck differently. Here's something most people don't realize about trucks built after 2010. Your engine doesn't run on fuel anymore. I mean, it does. Obviously. But fuel is not what decides whether your engine runs. Permission is. Your ECM, the engine control module, receives data from anywhere between 30 and 120 sensors depending on the model. Coolant temp. Exhaust pressure. Boost pressure, DEF quality, DEF level, DEF temperature. Intake air temp, barometric pressure. Crankcase pressure. Rail pressure. Each one of those sensors is essentially a vote. And if even one vote comes back wrong, the ECM doesn't ask questions. It doesn't give you a second opinion. It pulls the throttle. Engineers have a name for this kind of architecture. They call it a single-point failure system. And your truck is full of them. Let me give you the most common example happening right now in shops across the country. The DEF quality sensor. It sits inside your diesel exhaust fluid tank and its only job is to verify that the fluid meets a specific concentration, around 32.5% urea. When that sensor drifts, and they drift constantly, your truck thinks the DEF is contaminated. It doesn't warn you and move on. It gives you a countdown. Literally, a countdown on your dashboard. In most GM Duramax trucks post-2017 you get approximately 200 miles before the system limits you to 65 miles per hour. Then another countdown. Then 55. Then the truck will not exceed idle speed. You could have a perfectly running engine. Fresh oil. New filters. Full tank of clean fuel. Doesn't matter. A $180 sensor that misread a fluid concentration just turned your $75,000 truck into a paperweight. And here's what makes this worse. Sensors don't fail alone. When one sensor sends a bad reading, the ECM starts compensating. It adjusts fuel trim. It changes boost targets. It modifies EGR flow. Those adjustments put stress on other sensors that are now reading data that doesn't match their expected range. So you get a second fault code. Then a third. Mechanics call this a cascade failure. I talked to a Cummins tech in Oklahoma last month who showed me a printout from a 2021 Ram 3500. The owner came in with a check engine light. One sensor had failed. Just one. The exhaust back pressure sensor. By the time the truck reached the shop, the ECM had logged 14 fault codes. 14. From one sensor. He said he sees this at least twice a week now. And this is where most people ask the obvious question. Why would they design it like this? And the answer is actually not conspiracy. It's compliance. After EPA Tier 4 emission standards took effect, manufacturers were legally required to ensure emission systems could not be ignored. Not notify the driver. Not recommend service. Ensure the system cannot be bypassed. So the manufacturers built exactly what the regulation demanded. If the truck can't verify that its emission system is working perfectly, it is required by federal law, to derate the engine. That's the word. Derate. Reduce power until the system is verified. The truck isn't broken. The truck is doing exactly what it was told to do. And that's somehow worse. Because it means the system is working as intended, even when it's punishing you for a sensor that costs less than your truck payment. But here's the part that actually matters if you own one of these trucks. First, and I know this sounds basic, carry spares. A DEF quality sensor. A NOx sensor. An exhaust back pressure sensor. These three account for roughly 60% of all derate events in post-2017 diesel trucks, based on data from Diesel Tech Forum and independent shop reporting. They're small. They're under $300 each. Keep them in your toolbox behind the seat. A decent mechanic can swap most of them in under 45 minutes on the side of the road. Second, invest in a quality OBD scanner. Not the $30 ones from the parts store. Something that reads manufacturer-specific codes and shows you live sensor data. Because here's what most owners don't know. You can often catch a sensor drifting before it triggers a derate. If your DEF quality sensor is reading 28% when you just filled with fresh fluid, that sensor is on its way out. You replace it Saturday morning in your driveway, instead of Wednesday afternoon on I-40 with a trailer full of equipment behind you. That's not a loophole. That's just knowing your truck better than the computer does. I want to leave you with something to think about. In 1994, a 7.3 Power Stroke had 7 sensors on the entire engine. By 2024, a 6.7 Power Stroke has over 90. The engine didn't get 13 times more complicated. The regulations did. The electronics did. The failure points did. And somewhere in that math, we went from trucks that told you something was wrong, to trucks that decide for you what you're allowed to do about it. That's the single point failure problem. It's not that sensors break. Everything breaks. It's that one sensor breaking can override everything else that's working. And until that architecture changes, the smartest thing you can do is understand exactly what's between you and a truck that still moves when you tell it to.